So why would we use Excel VBA? Excel VBA you could consider as an extension of Excel in that it can do things that Excel can't do. It's a very powerful language indeed, and quite underestimated a little. But let me just show you an example of how you would modify the behavior of Excel. We know how to use a lookup function. Just to revise that, what we're doing is we're looking down here for the value of Joe in this table here, and finding the value which corresponds to it, which is 20. That's the function of VLOOKUP. So that that's the standard notation for VLOOKUP, and that you're looking for Joe and then the range in which you're looking, which is the blue area at the moment. Now the interesting bit is the 2 here, which it means it's actually the second column that you're looking in. And finally you have false, which means you're looking for an exact match. So Joe has got an exact value of 20. Now there is a problem, and that is that VLOOKUP can't work backwards. Well, maybe I could just try and modify things so that it will try and make it work backwards. What I mean is this: if I'll just move this across for the moment, and this can go here, and then okay, it looks like there's a problem with my range here, so I'll just extend that. Now, so that you could say was the normal function of VLOOKUP, and that you're looking down here for Joe, but you're trying to find something over here. Now you're trying to go backwards. Well, it can't be done with VLOOKUP. We could give it a try. We could put in here -2, and you could try doing it. Let's see. No, it doesn't work. So what we can do is to write our own version of VLOOKUP and modify the behavior of Excel using VBA. And this is what I've actually done down here. So if I click into here, and I put this function here which is called my VLOOKUP, which I've written in VBA, and you can see that it works. That's the area, and we've used the actual value of -2, means going backwards. And I can hear people saying, well, I can do this another way. I can use index match, and yes, you can. It's a bit of a to-do, really. It can be done, but it requires a bit of thought. Whereas here you've got a ready-made function which should work without too much thought. And okay, we could have an actual look at the code for this my VLOOKUP. So I'll just right-click on the bottom and go to View the Code, and here it is. Here, this is the actual VBA that's been written. Well, not quite. Let me just find it. So if I go to Project Explorer, and then I'm looking for Visual, there it is there. So I'll just get rid of that for the moment. So you can see the code. Now it won't mean anything to you if you haven't done VBA, but you could just get a few general ideas of how things work. For example, if we look at the top here, we've got this CD string. Well, that actually corresponds to over here we've got Joe being input. I'll just bring my screen down. And you've got the range here which corresponds to the range in here, and so on. So these are more or less input into the function from the user. We call this a user-defined function. then you might look at things like, oh, well, this is the count of the number of cells, which in fact is just 3. So you're saying go from I equals 1 to 3. It does show you the idea of the most important things in VBA, and that's a loop, which is here, and also an if statement. So what you're saying is here, for a loop, you're looping through things from 1 to 3. You're going down here, 1, 2, 3. And as you go down, you have an if statement here, and it says, well, if this value is the value that you're looking for, which is the Joe, then what you should do is consider the value to the very left of that. And that, therefore, is your answer. Now, I really don't expect you to understand any of what I just said, but just the general idea of how VBA works, roughly, behind Excel, if you like. And okay, next we'll consider another example of that, which is how to do a reconciliation. We will write a simple VBA program using, as we'll see, a command button placed upon the sheet. We saw in the previous videos that there are ways of using VBA code, one of them being a user-defined function, and the other way we could use is using a command button. It may seem advantageous to or desirable to use a user-defined function, but we'll be using a command button to run the code. Okay, so the first thing we need is the developer toolbar, which is up here, the developer ribbon, and it won't normally appear by default, so you'll need to make sure you've got your developer ribbon, and the way to do that is to go through the options. Now this is for Excel 2010, so I'll click on File and then Options, and then it's under Customize Ribbon, a little bit tricky to find sometimes, and then you'll see here the developer toolbar, which is we need to check that, and then click OK, and then you will now have a developer ribbon. The way you do that will be slightly different for Excel for other versions, and it would be easier, I think, just to Google developer ribbon Excel VBA. So having done that, we need to now put a command button on the sheet. So we need to click on Insert and then the ActiveX controls. Make sure you choose that one and not the form controls. They're rather old-fashioned, lot of controls. So we click on the command button, click that, and then we can draw our command button. And the best way to access the code from there is to double click on that button, and that brings up the window where we will be doing our programming. So we could what I'll do actually is to minimize this Excel, and then so we can actually see the code being written very easily. So what I'm going to do now is to write some code which places a number into cell A1 when we click the button. So I'm going to type the keyword range and then inverted commas and then the cell reference, which is A1, and then followed by full stop value, and then if we want to just put a number in, I'll put a number, any old number, say 34 for example. And notice how when I click away it capitalizes the range with the capital R, so we know that our spelling is correct. So it's a good idea to always type lowercase, let it capitalize it for you so you know that your spelling is correct. So well, let's just run this code first of all. So what I'm going to do is to take the design off. I can take the design off from here, or I can take the design off. You'll find another button in here if I make this a bit bigger. There it is there, the design mode. So we could do it from either place, but I'll do it from here to take the design off. Now why would we want to have the design on? If we want to make adjustments to the button, move it and make it slightly bigger or smaller, that's why we would have the design on. So I'll take the design off up here, and that means we can now run the code. So if I try that, click the button, hey presto, we've got the number 34, which appears there as desired. Okay, now it's probably a good idea to, well, we could go back to the design node and move around with the button and so on. It's probably a good idea to just leave that off. And as long as you've got the two windows open, one is the Excel and one is the VBA, you can think of them of separate applications. If you were to click this Excel button here, would close both of them, but clicking this one here would just close the VBE, Visual Basic Editor. Now, what are all these things we've got here? Well, sub, what does that mean? Sub is like a unit of programming, so it stands for subroutine. It's where basically we can put our code for the time being, at least. We have things called functions as well, but we talk about those a lot later on. Just for the moment, this is like a compartment where we can put our code automatically. Let's take a look at other sheets that might be around as well. So if I go to View and then Project Explorer, you'll see all the other sheets. Well, you look at the bottom of the Excel and you'll see there are 3 sheets there. If I were to make that a bit bigger, you can see there are 3 sheets there, and corresponding to each of those sheets is a code sheet, and which is what we have here, is this code sheet. And we have a command button, which is an object, which is on that sheet 1, and so correspondingly in sheet 1's code you'll have the command button code. You'll see that at the end of that we've got this thing called click. Well, click is what we call an event, and you see it's got an underscore here, which means that tells you that something, the thing which is following, is an event. What's an event? The event is something from hardware. So for example, a click with a mouse or a keyboard press. You'll find other ones here, key up and key down. They won't concern us for quite a while yet. Just to know that that's something that you do to the button is an event. And command button 1 is obviously the name of that command button, which is what we call an object, a command button object. Private doesn't concern us. We could actually leave that out if you want to, but it means that this bit of code is private to this particular sheet and it can't easily be accessed from elsewhere except the sheet, so that won't concern us. As I say, you could leave it out if you wish, the private for the moment. Option explicit up here is like a form of spell checking, if you like. When we make our variables, which we haven't got any variables at the moment, we need to make sure they're spelt correctly by using a dim statement, but we don't need that at the moment because we don't have any variables. If we want to edit the code, then let's see, if I were to close this here, and that closes the VBE. Now how do I get it back again? Well, another way we could do it is I could right click on here and choose View Code. Another way of doing it would be Alt F11, which I'll do right now. Hold the Alt key down and I'm pressing F11 key. That brings the code up as well. Let's see what happens if we make an error in the code. I'll just deliberately misspell this. And now, if I now want to run the code, it causes an error. It says that the sub or function is not defined, whatever that means. So we could click OK for the moment, but notice how it's got a yellow line here, which means it's stalled basically. Now, what you might do inadvertently, well, I'll tell you what we should do, and we should press this little blue button, the reset button, which will stop it, and then we can change the code. But what you must be careful, because if your Excel window is so that you can't see the code beneath, and you keep clicking that, you think everything is working fine, but it's not. So make sure you always go back to your code window and take a look, and if it is got a yellow, line there, then you can click the reset button, and then you could fix that up. Well, I'll just fix it up by clicking the undo button, and then we could now edit it as well if we wished. For example, if I wanted to put some text into cell A1, then I would use inverted commas and put whatever you like in inverted commas, and you'll see that it's text. It'll be left aligned rather than right aligned when it goes into the cell. This here is actually called, it's a bit of text, but they've also called a string. A string is a bit of text, and we'll talk about that a lot more later. But if I were now to click the button, you'll see that now the text is being put in, it's left aligned, and that's how you basically edit within your VBE, your Visual Basic Editor.